Welcome to the IdahoSports.com 2016 Fall Football Preview. I'm Will Hoenike, joined by Matt Harris and Paul Kingsbury. It's time to go to the 8-man game. 1A Division 1, those are the bigger 8-man schools. The 1A Division 2, we also have a segment for you. Don't feel bad. Go ahead and go check that out as well. But we're talking 1A Division 1 here. And last year we go back to the state playoffs, Valley winning the state championship, until the quarterback, tremendous playoff, if you will, but also, man, just some wild games.
You know, there were some wild games. One of them we did was that semifinal game, Valley versus Lapwai, 104-48. First quarter took an hour to play. Long game. Second half, it was mercy rule, and they still dropped 104, and it was turnovers, running them all the way. It wasn't piling on. It was just 104-48. Good sportsmanship throughout by both teams. Just a long game, and we'll get to a mercy rule. We'll explain the mercy rule later on. But 8-man football, anything can happen. There's really no – there is leads that are insurmountable, but they're less insurmountable than there are in the 11-man game.
A game can change very quickly at the 8-man level.
Absolutely. You've got fewer players on the field, obviously, but most of the time you're playing on a 11-man regulation field. So if you've got speed in the 8-man game and a quarterback that can make that defense be honest, and you can get to those corners and go, it's a fun game to watch.
And you could get really creative in the 8-man game, too, whereas it's a little bit more difficult in 11-man with more players on the field. And when you watch the 8-man game overall, it's just so fluid overall. The players and the teams, they come up with interesting styles, flavors of their own offense. Like I remember watching Valley last year, and it was just how unique and how well they could blend the run and the pass game for their run to the state title. And you know, in the 8-man game, it's just so fun to watch. I've worked with broadcasters who had never covered an 8-man game before until the day that we went to go do it, and they said, this is more fun than the 11-man game almost. And just because of the speed and how fast teams can score, and like you said, how wide open it is. Right. All of that space on that field, on playing on a regulation high school field, but 8-man football, it's just so much fun to watch.
I actually have a proposal into the IHSA to make the entire state 8-man. We'll see how far it goes.
Hey, it'd be entertaining.
That'd
be for sure. Teams like Rocky Mountain could probably field 7 8-man football teams.
Varsity football teams.
Yeah, we're playing Rocky Mountain 6 this week.
We're playing their D team.
The 8-man classification, over recent years in particular, that's really been run by District 2 and by District 4. We're going to start with District 2 right now, that White Pine League. You mentioned Lapwai in the playoffs last year. Prairie won a championship in there. Troy, a perennially tough team. Man, you survive that White Pine League.
Right.
You know, and I say this flippantly, the state playoffs can almost be a reprieve from having to face some of these teams week in and week out.
And Troy last year almost didn't have a team. They had that 11th hour bond election, passed in the end. They ended up getting a team. Bafis came back, coached last year, and they had a good run. They had a season, and that's what's important. But you get into that White Pine League, and you're right. I mean, Kamei, how many times have we seen Kamei in the state tournament? Troy Wallace is now down in there. So the 1A D1 White Pine League, it's just a fun league.
Yeah, it's just one of the premier conferences in the state. And if you look at terms of difficulty overall, and you're to compare it against all the others, it's just as difficult as an 11-man conference would be for particular teams. I mean, those two teams, that conference in District 2, I should say, they are a very, very tough conference. You've got Prairie, who's year in and year out seemingly a contender. You've had Troy, you've had Genesee, you've had Lapwai in the last year. They stepped up as well. There's a bunch of good teams in District 2, and I mean, and kind of like you said, if you can make it out of that conference with a decent record, you're in good shape heading into the state tournament.
Athletically, Prairie dominant the last couple of years. Ultimately, they did fall in the semifinals last year of the 8-man, but that remarkable run of athletes, Jake Bruner is gone, Hinkleman is gone, Shears is gone. Some of those kids that had been the core of 3 just outstanding seasons for Prairie. Could we expect a little bit of a recession from Prairie, A, and B, is 7 wins considered truly a recession for a program that's just been rolling everybody the last couple of years?
And losing in the state championship last year to Valley, 54-32, to them it's a setback, and to other teams it's like, we got a red trophy. Great. But they're one of those teams, they're bringing back Wemhoff on defense.
Lucas Wemhoff.
Freaking outstanding player. We've enjoyed watching him many games. So if you've got something to build around, and Prairie has tradition. Prairie has the program coming up underneath. And that's what is missing a lot in some of these smaller towns. there's just not that program coming up like you have in the 5A4. You got Optimist and Grid Kid back, in eastern Idaho. But Prairie seems to have that program where there's always kids coming up that are being taught the system all the way up. Hasselstrom, what a great coach.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we go, head coach is out there painting the lines before the game.
Right.
Great guy, great facility. It's always fun to be on the flatbed truck at Prairie High School doing games. So you never count them out, basically, is what the answer is. Never count Prairie out.
You talk about tradition, you talk about the program you have set there. Well, for Prairie up in Cottonwood, I mean, that is the entertainment there too. So the kids, they've been watching these games all growing up, and they say, I want to be a Prairie Pirate when I get older, for example. And that's where you get a lot of this tradition from, and why you always have kids working towards that, because that's what they want to do when they're older. They want to play. They want to be a star on the team. They want to be able to be a person who could bring hardware back to their community. And that's why you see a lot of success at schools like Prairie. I expect them to have another great year despite the talent that left it, because they've always got someone else coming up the pipeline.
Prairie, obviously, you got to factor them in. Lapway, Cameron Shaw, very good player.
Yes.
He'll be back this year. How about Genesee returning 5 all-White Pine players? Troy returning 4 all-White Pine players. Right. That league looks as deep as ever.
Yeah.
It's going to be a completely different landscape than it was last year, I think. We're looking at records last year. Genesee 4-5, Potlatch 1-7, Troy 3-4, Clearwater 1-7. I think when we're doing this show next year, it's going to be they're going to be completely different numbers on this. Those returning players make so much difference as far as leadership on the team, knowing what they're doing, that confidence level, the swagger as they come in, and it affects the juniors and the sophomores on the team as well.
Well, and if you say on an 11-man team, well, we have 5 returning starters. Okay, that's not bad. You say you have 5 returning starters on an 8-man team, that's a huge advantage compared to everyone else, just because you bring back so much experience, and the leadership that they will give to those new coming starters will really get them integrated into the offense or defense or whatever unit that they're playing on much more quickly.
1A Division 1 is what we're talking about now. We'll have a separate breakout for Division 2, so let's move down the highway to 1A Division 1 Western Idaho Conference. The traditional teams you see there, the Horseshoe Bends, the Idaho Cities, the Wilders. Wilder, a number of great athletes. We saw them come in second in the state baseball tournament this past year. But, I mean, my eyes go directly to the Notice Pirates. And this is a program that through the late 90s and early 2000s, you could count on them every year. Went through a little bit of a swoon, but you're returning 5 players: Caleb Zimmerman, the Conference Offensive Player of the Year, Brandon Patrick, Isaiah Haskell, Justin Hutton, Mark Green. That's a lot of talent coming back for Sam Crockett and Notice.
And you look at last year's records. They're the only team in the 1A WIC with a winning record. And this year, I think it'll be different. I think the teams are going to step up, but Notice is definitely the team to beat this year in the WIC.
And it wasn't too long ago that Wilder was in the 1A Division II championship game against Lighthouse Christian. Yeah. Kyle Dalsolio, he's got a good program going there in Wilder. They could be a team potentially to watch for. And, of course, there have been some struggles, at least in terms of fielding a football team in District 3. You look at Greenleaf, that's not fielding one now. We've mentioned Rimrock before. We'll get more into that as well. Overall, though, it's been kind of tough for District 3 1A Division I schools lately. Haven't made it very far in the playoffs overall.
Right.
And we kind of talked about this before with the 2As, where there's just kind of sometimes there's just a lull for a certain conference for a few years, and then they come back. This could be the start of the comeback for the 1A WIC.
A couple of very good players in the conference. You've got Colin Michael, very versatile player on offense, quarterback, wide receiver, also plays linebacker. Coulter Elliott at Horseshoe Bend, another very good football player back in the mix this year.
And the game to watch, I think, in this 1A D1 WIC has got to be Notice at Wilder, October 21st. End of the season, could be for the league. Absolutely could be.
So now that shifts us down the road to the District 4. We talked about how District 2, District 4 basically run in the show. The only 1A D1 team in District 1 is Wallace, so they'll be competing in the White Pine this year.
Right.
Likewise, you go down to the Snake River Conference, and District 4, District 5, District 6, Matt, they've all kind of merged into one. You might call it a super conference, but at 8-9 teams, it's maybe the largest conference in the state of Idaho outside of the 5A SIC.
Yeah, and the reason that they're joining is because Butte County dropped down to 1A Division II. That left Chalice and Grace to either play by themselves or to compete in District 4 in the Snake River Conference. Now, a few years ago, they did that when it was Butte County, Chalice, and Grace. They all decided to do that before District 4 said, no, we just want to do it by ourselves. So this year, you've got Chalice and Grace now having to travel to District 4. But to your point, District 4, I mean, if it's not District 2 winning the title, it's District 4. I mean, you have the run of Hagerman a few years ago, Valley last year. Oakley's had some good runs as well.
Yep.
There's Raft River's had some good runs too. Yep. There are a lot of good teams that are in District 4 that this year could make a good run towards that title. Once again, I mean, Valley brings back quite a few players. Oakley, Glens Ferry could have a good team as well.
Correct, yeah. Definitely a team that could be of sleeper variety, which we'll get to in just a moment. But we talk about so many teams struggling to fill conference games.
Yeah.
Definitely not a problem here. Is you've got more than enough teams where you're not having to go find a lot of non-conference games.
Well, and you look at the conferences that only have 2 teams in it, or if you look at Wallace, for example, they played as an independent for the past 2 years. So every single one of their games was a non-conference game until they got thrown into the play-in game against the winner from the White Pine League. And so for them, it provides them more stability. But there are drawbacks to that stability, which we'll touch on later.
Yeah, and you can fill your games, but how far are you driving to fill those games?
Some of them a long way, which also we'll get into coming up in just a bit. Something we're doing in each of these segments, we're calling it On the Spot, and it's where I get to look cool by putting these two guys on the spot. They have to put their necks on the lines. Matt, I'm going to start with you. In the 1A Division I ranks, we've dropped a lot of team names on you. We've mentioned some players. We've mentioned some matchups. Who's a team you're looking at that maybe we haven't talked about a lot yet?
Let's look at Oakley here for just a second. The Oakley Hornets made it to the state quarterfinals last year. They fell to Prairie, and they had a very good season overall. They also didn't have one of their main players there, Bridger Cranny. He was injured in the season opener. Obviously didn't get to play the rest of the year. They went 6-4 last year. Average of just over 40 points per game, gave up around 25 points per game, but they bring back a really good core of players. I mentioned Bridger Cranny. There's Houston Beck, Austin Bedke. There's an all-state defensive lineman in Oakley with Bryson Cooper. Now, they lose a couple of guys on the line, but they do have some guys who are going to be able to step up as well, but how fast will they be able to adjust to the varsity level? That'll be the question for Oakley. However, they do absolutely have the talent to make a run for the title, and if there could be a second team that I throw in there, I'd say Glens Ferry as well. They really picked up steam towards the end of the season. Yep. They've got a great core of skill players coming back. The offensive line is a question. They'll have to have players step up in there, but they also need to work on their secondary. Coach Morrison in Glens Ferry said, we can't allow that much pressure to be on our secondary all the time. We have to defend better in the secondary. If they can do that, if they can get those linemen integrated too, Glens Ferry potentially could make a run, a team that hasn't really done a whole lot in recent memory. That'd be very nice to see.
Yeah, you always want to see those teams that haven't done well in the past do well. You hate to see teams just kind of stagnate and do. You always like, especially fans of the sport like we are, like to see those teams doing well.
Right. Fun to see a team make a run, and a couple of years ago we saw that. You mentioned the 1A Division II, the Wilder Wildcats, and Paul, I know that's a team that you've got on your radar. Absolutely.
My on-the-spot team, they are the Wilder Wildcats. Del Solio is 8th season, 4-4 last year, 500. If you're a Cubs fan, that's usually a great season.
It's fantastic. You're happy to get to 4 wins if you're a Cubs fan.
Ouch. But
I'm a Mariners fan.
You're a Mariners fan.
How am I making fun of anybody?
You've struggled for a while too.
1995, refuse to lose, baby.
Well, in the 1A schools, a lot of times you'll have that one standout player, that one standout athlete for all your sports, and that athlete right now is Colin Michael there in Wilder. We watched him. Catcher for the Wilder Wildcats. If you're going to be stealing third, turn your head because he'll one-hop it.
Oh, man. He
caught Scheffler from Potlatch right in the mouth.
Throws hard.
21 stitches, I think, concussion. Great arm, though. Great arm. But and that leads right into his success at quarterback for the Wilder Wildcats. I think he had 1,000 yards, 11 TDs, and he's a dual threat. The guy can run. Mm-hmm. And if you got a dual threat quarterback in the 8-man ranks, watch out because they have to respect that. The secondary still got to stay back and watch so you don't know what they're going. They also have senior wide receiver Fabian Blanco coming back. Great athlete in Blanco. A lot of returning bodies to help with the new guys on both sides of the ball, which is huge. Defensively, you've got second team all-conference Oscar Puga at linebacker along with Colin Michael, also there on that stout defense. And with seniors like Michael Blanco, Montez, Aguilar.
Jacob Aguilar, yeah.
Oh, great athlete as well. We've seen him. With so much young talent coming up, they're training these kids. They're training these kids to come up. Vargas, Renteria. Watch for the Wildcats to be right in there. And maybe not even right in there, but actually leading the way in the 1A D1s.
A couple other teams to mention as we wrap this up. This is where I get to kind of put my neck on the line. Not quite as informed as these guys. Genesee coming out of District 2, a lot of talent returning there, and Raft River. You mentioned them a little bit earlier. They're that team with the extent they had a 1 or 2 year kind of bottom out. They've rebounded nicely, returning 2 All-State kids in Wasey Holtman and Caden Hitt. Watch out for them.
Wasey Holtman, a fantastic football player. He's a lot of fun to watch, and he's going to be an impact player for them this year. And don't forget about Valley. They're defending champs, excuse me.
Valley.
Don't forget about those guys. Yeah, I mean, they got a new coach in Ryan Jarvis. They lose a lot of their offense. Ben Taylor's gone. Caleb Burke's gone. Michael Orietta, Jacob Henry, other players you can name as well. Yeah. Their offensive line, however, is back and ready to go. They still got Calvin Corum at running back. He could have a big year this year. So, I mean, like that Snake River Conference, District 4, 5, 6, it's loaded once again.
It is tough. We're going to take a quick time out here on IdahoSports.com. When we come back, we'll delve a little deeper into some issues facing teams in 1A Division 1. We'll also talk about some changes coming to IdahoSports.com, also how you can engage with us. All that is coming up after we take a quick time out here. You're watching the 2016 IdahoSports.com Fall Football Preview.
Check out my multi-movie simulation station.
Why wouldn't you just take Cable One's new Ultimate TV experience powered by TiVo? It's a whole home DVR that lets you record 4 HD shows at once. Cool. Cable One, it's just common sense.
Some people go the extra mile. Your Northwest Toyota dealer goes the extra 25,000 miles. They give you 2 years or 25,000 miles of no-cost maintenance and 24-hour roadside assistance. It's called Toyota Care, and it's included with every new Toyota. That means wherever you are, you'll be prepared for anything. Get Toyota Care no-cost maintenance and roadside assistance at your Northwest Toyota dealer today. The best in the Northwest. Toyota, let's go places.
Valleywide Cooperative is a locally owned farm supply cooperative committed to meeting the needs of its customers since 1920. We provide you products and services of the highest quality. We are found serving our customers throughout southern Idaho, eastern Oregon, western Wyoming, and other neighboring states. We provide agronomic products and services, bulk feed and petroleum, competitive services in our propane division, and a vast array of products in our Valley Country store locations. Let us help you. Come see us today at Valleywide Cooperative.
Here come the last of the 2016s.
Stylish Prius, sporty Camry, adventurous RAV4, they're all here. But not for long. Come in and get the 2016 Toyota you want before they are gone.
Toyota, let's go places. It was our dream to move out here. I just wasn't sure what she would think. Took her away from her friends, asked her to do twice the work of most kids her age. But through it all, she never gave up. On me, or anything else. Wonder where she learned that. Massey Ferguson, the last tractor you'll ever need.
Welcome back to the IdahoSports.com Fall Football Preview. I'm Will Hoenike. We're talking 1A Division 1, 8-man football, where District 2 and District 4 have ruled the roost. District 3 wanting to get back into it. A lot up in the air as we get ready for our August 26th opener coming up here real soon. Man, it has come up quickly. And It's time now for our little discussion point here. And when you get into the small schools, guys, the trend we're seeing is, for lack of a more complex way to put it, the smaller starting to get smaller. Yeah. We're not seeing too many of these smaller towns. We're not seeing the Clark Forks, the Dearys, the Kendricks, whatnot. We're not seeing them grow that much. Unfortunately, we're seeing it go the other way, which is presenting some big challenges to these schools, these communities, and these administrators.
Well, you look at a prime example. This is Butte County. Just a few years ago, they were a 2A school. They played 2A sports, and this year they dropped to 1A Division 2. I talked to Jody Coburn, the athletic director at Butte County, and I asked her about this over the winter because I knew that they were thinking about maybe going down to 1A Division 2 because their numbers were right on the line. And I said, well, what's the trend? And they said the trend is that people just aren't living in our small little community of Arco and in Butte County anymore, and more people are moving away. I mean, it's been staggering to see how fast that they have dropped in classifications, but that's not just them. I mean, you look at Murtaugh and Hanson. They had to combine as 1A Division II schools so they could play football because they wouldn't have enough players otherwise. You look at Greenleaf. Greenleaf doesn't have football this year. They had to combine with co-op with Rimrock last year in order to even field a team.
And even that was somewhat last minute-ish.
It was.
It didn't even work out in the end. They tried it. They got some injuries. They couldn't finish out their schedule. And it's just really tough to see because the ones who in a way lose here in some respects are the kids. While there's some more opportunities to participate, they're relied on more, and if you get an injury, it could be more devastating to a season than it would be if you were at a 2A or 3A school.
Right, and we're here doing a football preview. You know, we do high school sports, but there are greater things in life than high school sports, and that is families making a living.
Right.
And if they can't make that living in that small town, businesses shutter, the economy doing whatever, they have to go where they need to go to make that, to earn a living. So you can't fault them. You know, it's
right.
I actually tried to get my wife to move to Arco just so I could get the pirate burger at Pickles Place.
Pickles
huge
Place.
Huge fan of that. But it's just the way it is, and unfortunately, I don't see the trend reversing anytime soon. They're not opening new sawmills up north. It's just not happening. And so, unfortunately, I see them moving, and I think they'll go to the next largest towns, because you're in a small town, you want to kind of stay small town. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we talked about the 2As. They're kind of the Stretch Armstrong of the classifications, because they'll grow, they'll contract, they'll grow, they'll contract. And that's why. The small towns people will move there and then either have to move or go back.
And what's interesting, too, is you get a lot of 1A Division II size schools that petition up to play in 1A Division I.
In order to fit geographically.
Exactly, and that's what you see a lot, especially in District 3, when you have the Greenleaf, the Horseshoe Bends of the world. They petition up to 1A Division I, so they're not having to travel all over the place, up and down the valley and all around, and as opposed to staying in a close, relative metro area type situation. And so, I mean, economics become a big factor at these small schools too. I mean, a lot of them are running on levies and whatnot, and those only last for so long. There's only so much money with them, so they're playing a very delicate balance overall.
And then comes the travel issue, if you will. You get these teams in similar conferences where you have like a Glens Ferry. They're having to go play Grace and Chalice in a conference game, and that's no easy feat. You're getting on a bus and you're traveling. Lord knows how many miles. Yeah. I left my pedometer at home, so I don't know exactly how far, but that's a lot of travel to put on these guys too, which is a budgetary concern.
Well, from where I live in Idaho Falls, Chalice is a long drive. I mean, 2+ hours, and then you have to do. Glens Ferry this year has to go to Chalice to play a game there, so that you're looking at the very western edge of District 4, all the way up around the mountain, all the way up to Chalice. I mean, that's a huge travel, and you're going to see a lot of kids out of classrooms at that point, losing academic time overall, and that's something that the administrators certainly have to be worried about.
Oh, and I'm sure they are. But what do you do?
There's nothing you can do.
What's the option?
Yeah. Unless you play a 2-team conference, Chalice and Grace, and they didn't want to be like that because Chalice and Grace are a good 3 hours apart too.
Do you get to a point at some point, guys, where maybe we start seeing? See, I'm originally from Washington, and Eastern Washington is littered with co-ops. La Crosse, Washtuckna, Garfield, Palouse, St. John, Endicott. Do we start seeing more of those? So maybe some of these District 2 teams, do we maybe see a few more of those co-op when they can? So maybe you fill in some of the holes in a Division 1.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's never a bad idea to combine like that. I think there's a lot of schools in Idaho that could combine school districts, which would save copious amounts of money in administration. I didn't make many friends there in administration, but that's the case. You combine those school districts and schools that are close to each other, that opens up a very large amount of your budget. Combining schools for co-ops, it's a great idea when it works, and they have to be willing to play with each other. And Murtaugh Hanson, big rivals. They hate each other. But when it came down to it, the town went, you know what, for our kids to be able to play, we're going to combine and we're going to put a smile on our face and do it.
You get like a Deary, Troy, Genesee, Kendrick. You get the four of them together, and you're talking about old rivals. So there are guys that live in those towns that played against each other, 2 generations back. So it's not as easy as snapping your fingers and say, hey, let's co-op. Some work, then you look at a potlatch. There's nobody within, 30, 40, 50 miles in any direction for them to co-op with.
Well, that was the problem that was presented to Greenleaf once again this year. Now, last year they co-opted with Rimrock. They combined with them. out of necessity because both teams were struggling. Now, Rimrock couldn't do it this year because they had a big incoming freshman class, and that would have pushed them to the 2A limits. Well, the option was presented for Greenleaf to go to Parma. Well, Parma is a good, how
ways
far?
away.
It's a ways away. Like I think I read like 50 miles or something like that.
Too,
yeah,
I think.
It's 50.
12 parsecs.
12 parsecs.
Yeah.
So you're
like the Kessel Run.
It is a lot like the Kessel Run.
Yeah.
So you're driving. That's one way, and then you have to drive back. That's for practice every day.
Yeah.
I mean, it just becomes too strenuous on these families in smaller communities, and so some co-ops work like you mentioned. Well, other ones just aren't ever going to be possible, and then that's where you get into the danger of, well, do we keep playing this sport, or do we keep or do we have to join a different conference or do something to try to offset those downsides to it?
Now, in years past, there's been the only classification that has had a mercy rule before is the 8-man game. Now it's statewide, 5A all the way down to 1A Division II. For people who are new to the 8-man game, Paul and Matt, just tell people what that mercy rule is and how it's enforced.
Well, in 2A through 5A, it's a 40-point lead. Once you reach that, any point from halftime on, it's a continuous running clock. Only time it stops is on coach timeouts, injury timeouts, officials timeouts, or on touchdowns or field goals. It's a little bit different, however, in 8-man football now. The same rule sort of applies. At any point, it's at any point now that a 40-point lead is reached, the clock starts to run. With the same qualifications of it being only stops on injury timeouts, team timeouts, coach timeouts, or during a touchdown so they can reset. Now, the difference is, though, is that let's say it's reached in the first quarter, clock starts to run. It just starts running right then. At halftime, however, the losing coach can meet with the other coach and say, all right, we want to end the game, we're done, and the game's done. And that's it. Or they can call a timeout at any point in the second half, said, okay, we're done, we're just going to call the game here, and that's how it is. It's really a combination of the rule 2 incarnations ago when it was 45 points, as soon as that's reached, game's over, and the rule that was introduced last season, which is where as soon as you reach that threshold, it's just continuous running clock. It's basically the best of both worlds,
really is.
And I think it's going to pay big dividends because it gives them options now.
Right.
Whereas an option that they didn't really have before, where they felt, okay, we've got to keep playing the game. Well, the score is going to keep getting run up, and not whether intentionally or not, just for the simple fact that now you have to finish out that game. In 8-man football, if you're getting killed, all right, we'll just step back. We'll just call it a game. You guys can win and we move on.
Hurt, whatever the case may be, yeah.
Exactly.
And the old school way of doing it, like you said, end it. Well, that doesn't help your sophomores and your juniors that are coming up. That just gets your starters out there. They play for a half, rack up the numbers, everybody goes home.
And there are people who thought that version, one of the reasons they changed it, in a developmental term, not a wins or losses term, but a developmental term, you were hurting the winning team because you can either let the starters play or you can put in the bench kids, but you can't do both because you've only got a half a football game.
Exactly. And so, like you said, I think this is the best solution they could have come up with for everybody, including us, who broadcast the games.
I mean, when we used to do it under the old rule, the one 2 incarnations ago, I mean, that one, it was 45 points. Sometimes it was reached by halftime, and all right, we're done.
Pack it up and go home.
Pack it up and go home. But
my Mountain Dew's only half gone.
Yeah, dang it.
The ice hasn't even melted yet.
Yeah. You think about like all the fans, especially in these smaller schools where they have to travel so far now in order to have games. Well, think about all the fans that traveled there to watch a half hour of football.
Yeah.
Then traveled home. Eventually you're going to see fans say, well, if they're going to blow them out, I'm not even going to go.
Yep.
And then that makes revenue go down, and that brings up a whole other myriad of problems.
Well, and it hurts your kids.
Exactly.
If your fans aren't coming out because they know the game, or they suspect, I should say, that the game's going to be over, if it kicks off at 7 and by 7:45 you're heading to the neighborhood pizza joint, not only are you hurting revenue, you're just hurting support for the game, which is not a good thing.
You are helping the local pizza joint, though.
Or helping
you are helping the local pizza joint. But then again, and like Paul said, it's all about giving opportunities for kids to participate in high school sports without getting them beat down 70-0 kind of a deal.
Speaking of opportunities, IdahoSports.com with a tremendous opportunity starting in the month of November when we transition into state tournament time for football, carrying on into state tournaments for basketball as well. IdahoSports.com, the exclusive home for audio webcasting rights for the state tournaments. Paul, why don't you explain what that means?
Well, and we held the audio and video rights for 10 years, and this spring the IHSA Board of Directors opted to go a different direction with a different company for that, and with that went the audio rights, or the video rights. Well, the audio rights were left behind. They bidded that out. And last week, the IHSA Board of Directors voted IdahoSports.com to be the exclusive internet audio streaming service for the IHSAA. Now, what that means is we'll be doing all the games we can during football with video, but when it comes time where there's that right separation between video and audio, we'll do audio. State basketball, all 132 games, boys and girls, will be done audio only and for free on IdahoSports.com. Now, what does that do for radio? Nothing. Your local radio station can still come do the games. That has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our rights. That's between the radio station, the school, and the IHSA. However, if that radio station wants to stream that game on their website, that's where that conversation needs to happen between IdahoSports.com and the radio station. So we're excited about it, the opportunity to stay involved in the state tournaments. We're excited to still provide a free option for the fans and for the people that can't be there. And it's going to be a lot of fun for all of us, I think.
During the regular season, it's going to stay free, but we're also going to have video.
Yes.
Nothing changes in the regular season. Live video webcasts beginning on the 26th and 27th of August.
Yep.
Paul, why don't you walk us through a couple of the highlights of the schedule?
You know, we've got a great slate of games early on. You see there on your screen there, the 26th of Friday, Aberdeen American Falls. Great rivalry game. Another great rivalry game, Snake River Blackfoot. South Fremont and Gooding developing into a great rivalry.
Yeah.
Cuna BK, a great 4A rivalry. Now Cuna's 5A. But we're going to be there to see how things turn out. Grangeville at Moscow. We've got a broadcast team up in the District 2 area now. And then the Rocky Mountain Rumble, Shelley versus Snow Canyon, Utah. Rocky Mountain versus Pleasant Grove, Utah. Then on Saturday, the 27th, we've got Skyview versus Box Elder, Utah. Rigby versus Syracuse, Utah. Highland versus Lewiston in a big 5A matchup. And Minico versus Stansbury. Great slate of games for opening weekend.
Now, no 8-man games on week 1, but I promise you there will be 8-man games on the schedule, no question.
Yes. There will be some. I love broadcasting 8-man football. It's always a blast, and we love doing it for you, the fans.
Yep.
If you want to engage with us on social media, man, we would love to have you come visit us. Here's how you find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Those are the 3 big ones that we do. Come and visit us. Come interact with us. Hit the website. Check out the photo galleries. Check out the schedules. Check out the power rankings. We do our own statewide rankings each and every week. Come see how your team is doing. You'll be able to find all those things on social media, or else just click directly on IdahoSports.com. That's the way to find us. Yep. Well, that's going to do it for the 1A Division 1 preview show here on IdahoSports.com. I want to thank Lauren and Tyson, the backbone, if you will. They're the guys that are punching all the buttons, turning all the knobs, making sure you can see and hear us just fine. Matt Harris, Paul Kingsbury, I'm Will Hoenike. We will see you at the field starting on the 26th of August here on IdahoSports.com.